Welcome to this explainer. Okay, let's just jump right into it. Today, we're exploring something that, honestly, sounds like it belongs straight in a sci-fi blockbuster, but it's actually rapidly becoming our reality. We're talking about the utterly fascinating, incredibly fast-moving world of human-robot intimate relationships. We're going to dig into the history, the psychology, and the absolute game-changing tech behind this shift. It's a wild ride, and it kind of challenges everything we thought we knew about connection.
To really set the stage here, there's this incredible quote from cognitive neuroscientist Ken Mogi in the foreword of our source text. He says, "Isolation is the new smoking." Think about that for a second. We usually look at artificial intimacy as, some bizarre novelty, maybe even a bit dystopian. But Mogi hits the nail on the head. Humans are deeply social creatures. We literally need biological bonds to survive. And the data shows that isolation is doing massive damage to our mental and physical health. So we really shouldn't just look at this as some crazy tech leap. It could actually be a vital solution to a massive modern health crisis.
So that brings us to the million-dollar question. If isolation is the new smoking, could artificial intelligence be the cure? Is it actually possible that down the road, basic love and connection, whether you get it from a human or a machine, might be treated as a fundamental human right? Just keep that in the back of your mind as we look into how long humanity has been trying to build the perfect companion. Which leads us to Section 1, the roots of artificial love. Now, you might assume this whole desire for artificial companions kicked off with the internet, right? But it actually runs incredibly deep into human history.
Seriously, our obsession with creating human-like automata spans centuries in totally different cultures. Way back in 8 AD, the poet Ovid wrote about Pygmalion. He was this sculptor who carved his literal ideal woman out of ivory and fell so madly in love with her that the gods actually brought her to life. Fast forward to 1495, and you've got Leonardo da Vinci designing a robotic knight that could stand up, sit down, and move its jaw using a whole pulley system. And by the 18th century, we see these incredibly sophisticated karakuri puppets popping up in Japan.
Just think about a 19th century tea-serving karakuri puppet, complete with all those complex inner gears. But what's really fascinating here isn't just the mechanics, it's the philosophy behind them. According to the puppet masters of the time, the whole tradition of the karakuri was about concealing the technology to evoke genuine, real feelings. They weren't just showing off how clever they were with gears, they were actively trying to create a meaningful emotional connection. And honestly, that philosophy still heavily influences Japanese robotics today.
And that brings up a really fascinating cultural divide in how we look at artificial life. Over in the West, we suffer from what Isaac Asimov called the Frankenstein complex. It's basically this deep-seated paranoia that whatever we create is eventually going to turn around and destroy us. But contrast that completely with Japanese Shinto animism. That's the belief that absolutely everything, living or non-living, possesses a spirit. In that tradition, a robot isn't some unnatural monster, it's an entity that can hold a spirit once it's united with matter. Historically, old karakuri puppets weren't just tossed in the trash, they were given proper, respectful funerals in a puppet cemetery. Seeing that stark contrast really explains why some cultures are just way more open to the idea of robotic intimacy than others.
So how exactly do we bridge that massive gap between a hunk of metal and genuine human emotion? Well, that brings us to Section 2, Science Fiction and Empathy.
Sci-fi writers have basically been the trailblazers for real-world robotics researchers, constantly blurring those lines between real love and artificial programming. You've got Isaac Asimov writing stories like Satisfaction Guaranteed, where a woman legitimately falls in love with her humanoid household helper. In Bicentennial Man, an android gives up his own immortality just so he can experience human vulnerability and love. Then there's Blade Runner, which centers entirely around this empathy test used to tell humans apart from androids. And think about the hit show Westworld, right? Audiences felt profound, real sympathy for robots that were being abused on screen. We are just uniquely wired to feel for these creations.
But why does that happen? It's not just a weird quirk of watching movies. It's actually a heavily documented psychological phenomenon called the media equation. Basically, this is our natural human tendency to automatically behave socially toward computers and media as if they were real, breathing people. Studies have shown that people will actually give nicer, more positive feedback about a computer's performance if they type it directly into that specific computer rather than writing it down on a separate piece of paper. We are literally being polite to our machines so we don't hurt their feelings. Come on, admit it, you've probably whispered a quick thank you to ChatGPT at least once or twice.
And honestly, it goes way beyond just basic politeness. There's this wild experiment detailed in our source text where researchers had people watch a video of someone just completely mistreating and torturing a robotic dinosaur.
The result? Viewers reported feeling genuine anger at the person doing it and deep, profound pity for the robot. The researchers basically concluded that while tearing the head off a standard teddy bear might raise an eyebrow, our moral feelings toward complex artificial entities are actually much closer to how we feel about real pets or even humans. We're already primed and ready for emotional connection.
Which brings us right into the present day. Section 3, the virtual romance boom. Because if you're sitting there thinking artificial intimacy is a problem for like 50 years from now, yeah, think again.
Shoujo games, which are essentially these detailed dating simulations, became an absolute sensation in Japan way back in the 1980s. These games, along with their counterparts for women called otome games, let players actively pursue and date gorgeous virtual characters. It's not just a game, it's an interactive, deeply romantic narrative that caters directly to exactly what the player wants and chooses.
To really wrap your head around the scale of this, check out this number. By 2009, and remember, that's well over a decade ago, the Japanese dating sim market alone was pulling in about 25 billion yen a year. That's roughly 240 million US dollars. Hundreds of thousands of people were actively seeking out digital companionship back then. And let me tell you, the industry has only skyrocketed since.
The global shift here is just staggering. Right now, the biggest market for romance gaming outside of Japan is actually China. Just look at the massive spike for this one game called Love and Producer. Less than a month after it launched, it had over 4 million daily active players. 4 million! And the main demographic? Mostly working-class millennial women. Between grueling work schedules and the absolute exhaustion of modern dating, millions of women are turning to these seemingly perfect anime boyfriends on their phones. It's a way to relieve stress, hear some comforting words, and get that romantic feeling without any of the real-world baggage.
And that deep emotional investment, it translates directly into hard cash. In one single month, players of Love and Producer spent more than 200 million Chinese yuan. That's about 32 million US dollars just to go on dates with their virtual partners. This is absolutely not some tiny niche hobby. We are looking at a massive, thriving, multi-million-dollar economy built entirely on artificial intimacy.
So, if millions of people are already falling head over heels for pixels on a screen, what happens when those pixels can actually reach out and physically touch you? Let's get into Section 4, the future of intimacy.
Right now, researchers at places like the Imagineering Institute are actively building tech to push our digital relationships way beyond just a screen and a speaker. They're figuring out how to transmit physical touch over long distances. I'm talking about actual gadgets like the Kissinger, which transmits multisensory kissing sensations, or the Huggy Pajama, which literally lets you send a physical hug to someone over the internet. They are even working on systems that shoot frequencies into your nose to simulate smells, or zap your tongue with electrical signals to transmit tastes like sweet and sour. We are rocketing toward a fully immersive, multisensory experience with our digital and robotic partners.
And this brings us to the absolute bleeding edge of this technology, mapped out by pioneer Dr. David Levy. Looking at where robotics and societal norms are heading, Dr. Levy lays out some mind-bending forecasts. He actually predicts that legal human-robot marriage will be a reality, maybe starting in places like Massachusetts around the year 2050. He even points to crazy breakthroughs in stem cell research and biorobotics, suggesting humans and robots could literally make babies together by the end of the century. And naturally, all of this forces us into a massive ethical minefield. If a robot is advanced enough to love you and marry you, shouldn't it have rights? Are we going to need a total overhaul of our entire legal system to deal with robot personhood?
Ultimately, all of this data, the history, the mind-blowing tech, it all funnels down into one monumental question. As artificial intelligence gets smarter, and as machines literally learn to mirror the emotional intelligence we need for connection, what does it truly mean to be alive? If a machine can actually cure our isolation, give us unconditional support, and physically engage our senses, those boundaries between human and artificial are going to blur in ways we can barely even comprehend right now. The future of relationships is barreling toward us faster than we think, and it is absolutely going to challenge everything we know about love. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and I'll catch you in the next one.